Hi, this is a special added MommaKong says. Something important happened, and I think MommaKong and I had a short discussion, and I wanted to share part of that discussion with you. This is the December 29th, 2023. MommaKong says, here we go. To some, suicide is a philosophical exercise in empathy. To others, it is a struggle of sadness and despair so overpowering that self harm seems like the only path. As the news of Sun-Kyun Lee's suicide made the rounds, I thought about all the difficult times throughout my life. I thought about what I was thinking when all seemed lost, when I could smell the desperation deep in my soul. I wondered about those times and thought about Mama Kong. Mama Kong is part of the Korean survival generation. None of us can imagine the wretched despair growing up as a child in post World War II and then as a preteen in the Korean War. Within 2 decades, Mama Kong has survived Japanese occupation, an international war, and then a war where fellow countrymen killed their own because of political ideals. Many of that generation in Korea understood the importance of survival. Eh, Many now know how lucky they are merely to be alive. Survival was all that mattered in desperate times. So when I asked her about suicide, she called it a waste. There is abundance in Korea now, in stories, in people, in opportunities. South Korea is no longer the war torn third world nation of Mama Kong's childhood, yet it has one of the highest rates of suicide for any industrialized nation. Look up suicide in South Korea, and you'll see countless numbers of articles on the seriousness of the problem. Mama Kong knows about that too. She did mention the whispers of her friends and their grandchildren as they huddle in quiet worry about their different stresses that many of Mama Kong's generation do not understand. Feelings, pride, and loneliness all seem trivial against the starvation and homelessness that she faced. To Mama Kong, suicide seemed unnecessary, yet complicated. There are extreme factors where people of Mama Kong's generation understood suicide, where there is something to be gained, or for maybe an insurance policy, or taking the blame for a terrible shame. A philosophical exercise in weighing the impact of one's life against one's death. I measured that balance a couple of times in my life. I wondered if what I had accomplished was enough to counter the void I might leave. But it was a hypothetical. Even while holding a knife to my wrist, I knew it would have been a waste because I had people I could reach out to. And I had Mama Kong. Keanu Reeves was asked on The Tonight Show what he thought would happen after death. It was posed as a dive into his spiritual ideals, but his answer was beautifully personal. What happens when you die? I believe those who love you will miss us. I think about Sung Kyung Lee and the last episode of My Mister, the K drama, when he sits in the living room alone as the weight of everything he is carrying washes over him and drowns him in a flood of quiet tears. What happens when you cry in the middle of a forest? Does anyone ever hear your tears? Do they hear your calls for help? That is the crux of the cultural weight of loneliness, the quiet weight of suffering alone. I see too often in Korean dramas it being promoted, the idea of suffering in lonely silence. Like Sung Kyung's character, how many times did Mama Kong suffer alone? Did you ever see your parents suffer? Did they ever share their suffering? In discussing In the Whispers, we place shame on the suffering that leads to the crisis of suicide. In propping up the heroic silent suffering of our K dramas, we deny the idea of help. Even in the way I have talked about that moment in My Mister when Sung Kyung's character's pain finally escapes in waves of tears, I have promoted the idea of a hero of kindness suffering, suffocating alone. I connected to it, but I didn't understand it until now. I have to change that. We all need to change that. We all need to change and take Keanu's lead and think about the ones we love in the present. Think about them while they are still with us. Check in with them. Recognize the signs of depression and calls for help. I do not want to miss a loved one, and I hope I do not miss their calls for help. I want to cherish them in the present and love them in the present. Sun Kyung Lee will be missed. His many loved ones will miss him. I did not know him. In My Mister, I love the many trials of kindness he shared in that K drama. That last episode, in his moment of loneliness haunted me for a long time, even after I finished the show. And now I will think about him frozen in those tears of despair. May he rest in peace. May he find solace in the many characters of kindness and joy he left behind. If you have bouts of depression or suicide, call 988 on your cell. It will connect you to the local helpline in whatever location you are near. Or call me. Either way, talk to someone, please. 말해주세요. 제발.